You're staring at a phone screen, at the little gray check marks that refuse to turn blue, at the profile picture that hasn't changed, at the silence where a conversation used to be. For thousands of years, ending a relationship was messy. It involved arguments, letters, maybe a slammed door. While the term ghosting became popular in modern times, the act of ending relationships by doing nothing has existed for a long time. A quiet, digital vanishing act we call ghosting. And we think it's a modern problem, a symptom of dating apps and social media. But what if the reason ghosting feels so wrong isn't because it's new? It's because just 170 years ago, it could have destroyed your life. And not just socially, legally. In 1850, if you were a man who courted a woman, who wrote her letters, who told her you loved her, who promised her marriage and then simply disappeared, you could find yourself in a courtroom. She could sue you. And she would probably win. The charge was called breach of promise to marry. And for over 200 years in America and England, it was one of the most common and dramatic civil lawsuits a person could file. It was a legal weapon against the original ghoster. To understand why, you have to understand a world that no longer exists. Today, we think of marriage as a choice between two people based on love and companionship. That is a very new idea. For most of history, marriage was an economic transaction. And for a woman in the 19th century, it was the only transaction that mattered. She couldn't own property in her own name in most places. She couldn't enter most professions. Her entire financial future, her social standing, her place in the world was determined by who she married. This one's rough. A woman's eligibility for marriage was her single greatest asset. Her reputation, her virtue, her youth, all of it was capital for securing a good match. A public engagement was like signing a contract. When a man broke that promise, he didn't just hurt her feelings. He devastated her market value. She was now seen as damaged goods. Other potential suitors would wonder what was wrong with her. Why was she rejected? The public humiliation alone could make her unmarriageable for life. Ghosting wasn't just rude. It was financial ruin. And the courts took this seriously. These weren't quiet private affairs. They were public spectacles. Newspapers reported every detail. The woman would take the stand and describe the courtship. And the star witnesses were almost always the letters. The man's own words, read aloud to a packed courtroom full of his friends and neighbors. Every promise of love, every dream of a shared future, every intimate secret turned into evidence against him. The evidence didn't even need to be an explicit proposal. Juries could infer a promise from behavior. Did he visit her often? Did he walk with her in public? Did he give her gifts? Did he write letters that used the language of love and commitment? If he did, the law said he had created a legitimate expectation of marriage. And he couldn't just walk away from that without consequences. And what were the consequences? Money. Juries awarded damages based on several things. Her financial loss, what she would have gained by marrying him. The damage to her reputation and future marriage prospects. And here's the part that sounds shockingly modern, the injury to her feelings. Juries were literally asked to put a price on a broken heart, on the humiliation and emotional distress she suffered. And they did. Awards could be enormous, sometimes enough to support a woman for the rest of her life. In a world with no alimony and few options, a breach of promise lawsuit was one of the only tools a woman had to hold a man accountable for his words. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the world changed. And honestly, the reasons this law disappeared are the exact reasons we think of as progress. Starting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, women started fighting for their own lives. They fought for the right to vote. They fought for the right to own property. They went to college. They entered the workforce. Slowly, painstakingly, a woman's value was no longer tied exclusively to her marital eligibility. She could be a person in her own right, with her own career, her own money, her own future. And as that happened, the idea of marriage itself began to shift. It was no longer seen as a cold economic contract, but as a romantic partnership based on love. The legal system started to catch up. Judges began to argue that forcing someone to marry or punishing them financially for not marrying was a bad idea. If someone realized they were making a mistake, shouldn't they be allowed to back out? Forcing a loveless marriage through legal threat didn't seem like justice anymore. It seemed like a relic of a past everyone wanted to escape. The law started to feel outdated, embarrassing, even anti-feminist. It was based on the idea that a woman was a fragile, dependent creature who needed legal protection. The modern woman didn't need that. She could take care of herself. So, state by state, the law was abolished. By the mid-20th century, suing someone for breaking an engagement was almost impossible. Society decided that a broken heart was a private matter, not a legal one. And that the freedom to choose your partner also meant the freedom to change your mind. So, that settles it, right? The law died because we became more enlightened. Well, not quite. Because in getting rid of a law that was based on outdated economics, we also got rid of something else. We lost the public idea that words of romantic commitment have weight. We lost the shared understanding that a promise, even a private one, creates a real obligation. Legal historian Ginger S. Frost argues that these lawsuits weren't just about money. They were a way for the community to enforce a social norm, to publicly declare that leading someone on, making promises you don't intend to keep, and then vanishing without a word was a legitimate injury. It was a wrong that deserved a remedy. We didn't replace that old system with a new one. We just left a void. And into that void rushed the modern dating landscape. The apps that give you the illusion of infinite choice. The casual connections that are easy to form and even easier to break. The social distance that makes it possible to forget there's a real person on the other side of the screen. Ghosting is the logical endpoint of a world with zero social or legal accountability for how we treat each other in the pursuit of love. It's efficient. It's clean for the person doing it. There are no tears, no arguments, no need to explain yourself. But it is a quiet cruelty we have all, on some level, agreed to accept. Researchers who study ghosting find it so painful because it attacks our most basic need to belong. It's a form of social rejection that offers no information, no reason, no closure. Your brain processes that social pain in the same regions that process physical pain. But worse, it leaves you with a story you can't finish, a mystery with no solution. You don't just lose the person, you lose your sense of reality. Was any of it real? Did I imagine the connection? Am I crazy? The silence of the ghoster forces you to fill the void with your own worst insecurities. The people in the 1850s didn't have a perfect system. It was tangled up in sexism and economic desperation. But they had something we don't. They had a language. Visval, text, a language in bold hand-lettered text, with an old-fashioned quill pen writing words on a plain white background. They had a shared public script that said what you did was wrong, it caused real harm, and you are accountable for it. We have no such script. We have memes, we have complaints to our friends, and we have the quiet humiliation of checking our phones, again, knowing there will be nothing there. We look back at those old lawsuits and see a world we're glad to have left behind. A world where a woman's entire life could be ruined by a broken engagement. But they would look at our world and see something just as strange. A world where promises can be made with a few taps on a screen and broken with a wall of absolute silence. A world where connection is treated as endlessly disposable. Where you can share your time, your body, your hopes with someone, and then have them vanish as if they never existed at all. And there's not a single thing you can do about it. You're staring at a phone screen. At the silence. And you realize it isn't just the end of a conversation. It's the sound a promise makes when it no longer has any weight at all. We didn't just abolish a law. We created a world where the easiest way to leave is to pretend you were never there in the first place.